As I mentioned, that last one's slightly intimidating, high bar, a lot of emotional vulnerability, but it actually really means a lot to me. Just because I don't get a lot of opportunity, especially working at like a big company like Shopify, to work with exclusively Indigenous people. It might blow some people's mind, but I'm originally from Kitigan-Zibi in Quebec. Not many people would know. Maybe some people would know that only because a famous Vancouver Canuck is from there, who's Gino Ojic. He's originally from my res. But yeah, so that's kind of our claim to fame. And then I was talking to Christian earlier, like Christian and I's community are kind of like cousin communities. So we have like families that span over both reses. So we have like certain family names and shared cousins. And Kitigan-Zibi, yeah, Garden River. Yeah, so I mean, I know I wouldn't necessarily pass as it, but I mean, I come from a very similar Indigenous story to a lot of people. My dad's one of 13. I was primarily raised by my aunties, not by my dad. I was primarily raised by my dad's older sisters, two of them. And then with that, I lived most of my life on the res, and I spent a little bit of time in Montreal where I did my undergrad, and then kind of navigated over here to do my master's at Emily Carr, which is what brought me out west. Essentially, this talk's just going to be really focused on about hopefully building off of the last two talks, just bringing Indigenous identity, about the fundamentals of kind of running a business of any kind, but utilizing the totality of tools and recognizing that there's a lot more resources out there than you might have thought. Just in terms of what I do at Shopify, I work primarily in merchant success. I work as a designer on two product lines, our capital and our shipping. So I work like on how those things work, and then I mostly work with individual merchants and entrepreneurs, regardless of background, to kind of figure out strategies and how to best solve that based on their needs. With that, because I was tired of only being able to bring in my indigeneity at convenience, something I started about 3 years ago is I created an organization internal to Shopify, which is similar to N7. N7 was started by like a employee resource group. It was a bunch of Indigenous people that worked for Nike who wanted their own community, who were tired of leaving their identity at the door and kind of wanted to have that community and interconnect. So I did the same thing with Miigwech, which is based on just this thing that, I had a conversation with an elder, and he was talking about some of the things that you do, or some of the ideas, and he was talking about the idea of a feather being a bunch of separate entities but all working towards an individual point and kind of working together. So what I wanted to create was an Indigenous employee resource group that spanned where Shopify was. So we have an office in New Zealand. So Maori, Samoan, other Pacific peoples, and then also everyone across Canada. So anyone that works at Shopify has their own community, so that they don't have to, similar to the conversation earlier, sometimes you're just tired of having to explain why your sense of humor is the way it is, or why your identity is the way it is. And sometimes you're just I just want to be myself, and you want that kind of camaraderie, and it's huge to kind of work in any capacity to have yourself recognized in that totality. So essentially we had created that, and one of the things that we helped build is we also got someone to be the other person who co-started it with me. We wrote up a business plan, and we proved to the executives at Shopify that we needed to have somebody as the lead of Indigenous entrepreneurship, which is Jace Meyer. And now there's a position at Shopify that is there to solely support Indigenous entrepreneurs and build out the infrastructure for a 15-year plan. So everything that people do here is really hopefully going to resonate in that. And it's the first time that this has ever existed. There's no other big company. And my idea was always that I would rather indigenize from the inside. I'd rather build a platform and find really, really amazing people who only want to work with our communities, who only want to support ourselves. Because I think after I had breakfast, I was so inspired by our breakfast that I wrote you and Jocelyn an email that I was I will be unapologetically biased that I prefer to work with Indigenous businesses. Because it's true. I work with a bajillion businesses, but they just don't mean the same to me as it is an Indigenous business. Because it's, when you go back to the res, especially, the first question you ask is, oh, where do you work? And then I say Shopify, and they're like, Spotify? What is that? And then you're like, oh, cool, yeah. But then if you tell them, oh, I'm actually working on so-and-so's business or whatever, I had a call with them for 2 hours. We talked about shipping strategy or doing that. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I know her. she's friends with who, whatever, or cousins, blah, blah, blah. And it just, the kinship is just like real in those situations, and it just resonates a lot more in that context. So, I mean, that was the element. And then I also do come from a streetwear background. So I was the co-owner of a streetwear company for 5 years, like primarily in Ottawa and in Montreal. And just really that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship as a whole. It was my first exposure as like fashion as a mode of self-expression. So like in high school, I was really into screen printing T-shirts. I would just like make my own designs, and then I was kind of into like photos and like photochemical process, because the school on the res has like an actual darkroom. So I just did that, and then I made T-shirts, and then I was hanging out with my buddies, and I tree planted in northern Alberta for a little bit in my summers to make money. And then I would go back to Montreal, and I would kind of do all that. So I really built that business out of just, I don't know, really liking punk rock music and like just like making T-shirts, and then seeing that there's this huge thing. And I think that's where streetwear resonates for a lot of us, especially like I grew up skateboarding on my res, and like just kind of for me, like streetwear was really resonated with me when it kicked off, like in maybe like 10, 15 years ago. It was like a mode of expression. I never thought there was a place for me in fashion, and then I'm recognizing that there's a place for absolutely anyone, no matter like what background you are. So in that same instance, that really was the foundation of, I was running that, and I was doing my master's out here, and then Shopify, I had a friend working at Shopify who was like, hey, we need business owners who could help work in this merchant success out in Vancouver, because we need more people out there. And that's essentially how I joined. But yeah, to help you distinguish between the differences between Spotify and Shopify, this is kind of what it looked like maybe like 10, 15 years ago, is that you had all these different business entities. You had some people who ran their business on Facebook and Instagram. You have people who sell on Amazon. You have some people who have a brick and mortar store, and then you have some people who have an online store, and then some people who just do pop-ups. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, they used to be all separate entities. And then you as a business owner had to like prioritize which one was your strength and which one you wanted to dedicate more if you weren't able to scale and find somebody to do your online store or do whatever. Now that doesn't really exist. Now they're all kind of condensed into one singular idea. Now there's a lot of online business administration software that kind of does that, and that's sort of what Shopify is it has everything from your ability to take payments, to get capital, to run your marketing campaigns, to do your business analytics, to run like apps, third-party apps, like if you have like an email newsletter, inventory, order management. You have all your customers, you have all the stuff, you have your inventory stock, all those elements that after you design your brand, after you develop these amazing products, you develop your narrative, your story, all those different things, to kind of focus on, instead of, if this is the stuff that bores you to death, that you do not want to do because the other stuff is super inspiring, then at least this makes it a little simpler. And hopefully, before, where you used to have one person for all those things, now you have the opportunity where you could just use one single business administration software to kind of put that together. Of the brands that use Shopify, these are like some of the biggest ones. L'Oreal, Tesla, Subway, all that stuff. But I think the ones, in my opinion, that matter more are these ones. And then I mentioned Leslie's actually here right now, which is awesome. But all these ones, Manitoba Mucklucks, Cheekbone Beauty, Sequoia, Tribe Called Red, 8th Generation in Seattle, Raven Reeds. These are like a lot more businesses that are kind of from our community. And Angela soon. Yeah, of course.
What does Snow Devil do?
Snow Devil was actually the CEO of Shopify's first business. So he was like a nerdy coder who was frustrated that like there wasn't anything easy to run a business online. So he like made the software to sell his snowboards, because he was just an avid snowboarder from Germany. And that's like how it all started. So Snow Devil is like the OG business, and it's like kind of used every now and again. It doesn't run anymore, but it's used. She Native is a company from Saskatchewan. They make bags. They make really nice handmade bags. Yeah, bags, and I think they also make shirts and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I've been in their store once.
Yeah.
And I was in Saskatchewan playing on the basketball tournament. And
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
yeah.
shirts. Yeah. And like some like bags and stuff.
But their bags are like kind of what they're known for. It's really sweet.
Very high-end bags.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I have tons of other businesses too. It's like kind of like my beat, similar to Christian. It's like anytime there's anybody on the scene or anything like that coming up, I usually just like look at the products. I just kind of follow them. Like I've heard about your business, Mobilize. Like I've seen your stuff. I've followed it for at least the last year. Yeah. So some of the stats of Shopify is like crazy because when I first joined, it wasn't this big. Like it's kind of just, I think the independence entrepreneurship movement has really evolved in the last like 5 years of people just like, I don't really want to be in business for other people. I want to connect with my community. Like one of the first people I ever knew who was using Shopify was, she had a business called Quimies. Her name's Sunshine Tanasco. She's one of my really, really good old friends, but she essentially was a school teacher from the res who made baby moccasins and sold them at our yearly powwow, and was just so tired of these like knockoff baby moccasins of like other people appropriating it, trying to sell it. She thought the design sucked, the quality was garbage. She was just like, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna show them. I made this. She has like 6 kids, so she made them for like all 6 of her kids. And then she just was like, I want to go out there and I want to see it. So she started at the powwow, sold at the powwow, and then from there sold out. And then somebody was like, hey, you should sell them in Ottawa. She sold them in Ottawa at the Odawa Friendship Center powwow, which is like the kind of pan-Indigenous powwow in the city. Sold out, did really well. Somebody was like, hey, you should go to Toronto and do it. And she's just like, just not take no for an answer. She just kind of goes out and just like, okay, cool, I'll do it. She even wrote a kid's book called Neeby's Water recently, which is like wild, yeah. So she's an absolute doer. So in her case, like, she went to Toronto and then immediately sold out. They're an absolute hit. And then a producer from Dragon's Den saw her. So she pitched on Dragon's Den, got funding, and then like that from there, she kind of grew up. But she was the first person I knew that was on Shopify, and it was really, she was just so cemented in our community. She was just like a high school teacher, and then what she does now is she actually partnered with another business. It's called, it was on the other slideshow, it's called Her Braids. So what she does is she does workshops and she beads, but she invites like Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to come in and have a conversation about like reconciliation, about like lived realities, and they just like work with their hands, but it makes it easier to talk about those subjects sometimes, just because you're busy with your hands, you're in this like safe healing environment. So she runs that too, runs Quimies, and also has that kids book. And she was the first person that I knew was like, oh yeah, online software, I use that, I kind of don't really have to touch it, I make however many I make, I put it on there, and then that's it. But I mean, now there's over 1 million people who use Shopify.
What was her name?
Her name's Sunshine Tanasco, otherwise known as Quem. Everyone on the res calls her Quem, but her legal name's Sunshine. Yeah, so over $10 billion processed through the platform. It's available. There's businesses from 175 different countries now. And then just even last year, there was over 281 million different buyers that have bought through it. So individual buyers that have bought through all those various shops on the platform. So just to kind of summarize, Shopify is like a technology company that specializes in providing like a business platform with online websites and devices and solutions for a lot of people. The one element too that I would say that is that because we have Miigwan and we have like an internal advocacy group for Indigenous people, the biggest thing that we've done as of now is that they rewrote the tax infrastructure for it. So we're the only platform that has HST, status card tax exemption. So that was something that like was missing, and no one had that insight. No one had that insight, and I was like, yo, you realize you isolate this whole community of people that like we represent. So it's important to have that voice inside, and it's important that because otherwise like our stories are not going to be included. And similar to what a lot of the earlier conversation was, is that like, I think that right now, like what you were saying, which was, I think that sustainability and authenticity are kind of what drives the market right now. I don't know if I necessarily believe if it's trend or not, but I do think that we are the most empowered in terms of having authentic stories and authentic ways of viewing things, because it's only this generation or now where we're allowed to tell our own stories, where it isn't other people interpreting our stories and telling it back to us. So I think that mode too, and I've always looked at entrepreneurism, definitely in my early days when I had that t-shirt company, as just self-expression. So taking what you know, taking your experience and finding ways that like, you know, either, like my hope is that, you know, for the most part that we develop a society sophisticated enough to not always use the terms like Indigenous or First Nations, but to use it specific to where we come from. because like being called First Nations doesn't talk about the specificity of my community and how different my community is comparatively ever. Like the problems in a community in Alberta would be different than the problems of a community in Quebec. And I think that beauty and that richness, and now through the arts especially, where we're able to tell our stories and the specificity of that stories and see that dynamic, is really just like burgeoning. So opportunities like entrepreneurism, fashion, music, anything like that, it's really our age. And I think that like I have some qualms with the idea of a renaissance, but I do think that we've always been there. And it's not like it's new, it's the first time that we have the ability to control how those stories are told. So I'll just this part is kind of like, I'll just go into the basics of Shopify, give you an idea of like how it works. And then at the end, there'll be like a Q&A and any questions or anything like that. But so the basics here is it's an online and cloud-based software. So essentially it's like you sign up for an account, you get an administrator account, and then you log into that account. And then in that you have like a home dashboard. So you see that you have like all the different things that you could do. You have your homepage, you have where all your orders go through your online website. You have like where your products exist, you have where your customers exist. You have your analytics, so you can see like who's buying, like how many sales you made that month, like which products are selling really well, all the stuff, discounts, if you have discount codes or anything like that, you run it through there. Then you have like basic summaries of just like what those sales look like today on these various sales channels and all that. Online store, so essentially like with Shopify, you get that online storefront. So you get this back-end business administration, but in that with the online store, you get this ability to kind of like, you get like a template. I sort of go over it, it's called a theme, but you get a template and it allows you to kind of like, without being, you don't need to know anything about computers, you don't need to really know anything about like design or coding or anything like that. You just plug in your photos or all those things that you kind of developed when you're building your brand, you just plug them in and transfer them over and then you have your site. But I would say that that's an oversimplification. I don't know, Leslie probably say that, is that like obviously that takes some fine tuning to really make that story shine and not make you look cheap, because they are templates, so there's a lot of people who are using them and there's a lot of people who look exactly the same. So allowing yourself to take those photos to allow really your story to shine is like really huge. So the element of that, you build those individual products. It's as easy as this GIF is. You just put in the name, you put in the description, the images, the weights, all that stuff's kind of taken care of. And then the online administration software will like, when you go through the online store, it adds up all the weights, figures out like how much the total thing is. And then you have all those different rates that you got to charge from like Canada Post or whatever it is. So you have all those different strategies, but like I could tell you that because I work on the shipping team, it's like this day and age, like online stores are like almost like games in some way. Like people have these like super sophisticated strategies to try to mitigate some of the things that they were talking about earlier, which is like it's super expensive to ship in Canada. Like even if you're in a city, like it's just because massive country, low population density, not many flights that go in between these various areas in the same way it is in the States. So in that same case, what a lot of people do is they actually just like take some of those shipping costs and redistribute it as part of their product pricing, and then allow themselves to kind of like, make their shipping seem cheaper, even though you're getting it, as part of the product pricing. And the big thing too is that when you set product pricing, the number one thing that I've seen Indigenous businesses do, as opposed to other ones, is I find they don't allocate their value as appropriate as it should be. Sometimes they undersell themselves, and I really hate that. It's just one of those scenarios where like, if you source sustainably, like you're working in moose hide that you tanned yourself, and you cut up and you beaded everything by hand, you should charge $600 for it. You deserve it. You deserve it at the end of the day. And I think that in the case of that, like the reality is that distinction between that and something else that is cheaply made at Urban Outfitters or whatever it might be, the knockoffs, there is a true distinction between that. And people, thankfully, are doing their research more, and then hopefully with people like Christian in the places of power that he is, that narrative is going to reign supreme, and people will just buy from the source as opposed to buying cheap knockoffs because they like how dream catchers look or something like that. Collections are similar to fashion collections. It's just a collection or grouping of products. So maybe you have a summer collection coming out and you have a bunch of different things. It's more or less how you associate things into a group. It's like pretty sophisticated. Like sometimes if you really don't want anything to do, like if you just put in the legwork at the beginning of just having it automatic, you could really like kind of put the thing on autopilot to some element outside of like fulfilling and like maybe like shipping your stuff by hand or whatever that might be. All those things are kind of there for you. I mean, obviously those two things that would be like a sale collection. So things that you just want to get out because like you've held onto this stock forever and you're looking to like incentivize it. So you put it on discount, you have like the display of the pricing in that manner. Maybe you send out a notification, tell people that you're having a sale now, and it's all that you're trying to get a bunch of stuff off, and it just, I guess, tries to encourage people to buy. You have discounts, similar to that. Maybe you have things on sale. Maybe you want to give out like Black Friday, or you want to give out some sort of like, Indigenous Peoples Day, kind of like 25%, something like that. You would create that in here, and people would be able to just write in that code, and it would just add it. You have pages. Pages are like the most underutilized thing of like any online business, because that's like where you tell the story. And I think Indigenous businesses and Indigenous people are probably the best storytellers in Canada, like bar none.
When you're reviewing pages, the formatting, like when building it, is that through like code or
No.
there's not a lot of infrastructure in pages to like actually build that format to make it look like really nice?
Yeah.
Unless you have someone come in and
Because you need like a template you have to pick a template that has the code that like when you just type the text in, essentially you type the text in whatever you want it to be, you break it up in paragraphs.
probably have like a library of that.
Oh yeah,
They do.
yeah. Like there's over like 100 some themes.
For pages,
Not only for pages, but there's actually like things that you could find that will just allow you to quickly change it. Sometimes people use free apps too. There's a lot of free apps for pages specifically, because I think that's like a common desire, is that they don't want necessarily the pages to really look the same as the rest of the site. They want pages to really like be more like interactive and like tell that story like I was sort of mentioning. And then there's always like certain limitations where you have to like plug in a YouTube video and like do all that stuff. But I think like, I don't, yeah, usually like for most online websites, when you embed a video, you need to have it hosted online already. So most people put it on YouTube because that's just what people use. But then you have like a little embed code. It's like a little snippet and you just throw it in there. But yeah. Oh, if you ever like have troubles too, there's like tons of supports out there just to like tell you like exactly that thing. If you're ever like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I think the main thing about pages that I always want to get across is that, especially as Indigenous people, just because I think that the cultural richness in storytelling and the uniqueness is so many times underutilized. Like not enough people really tell that story that really allows people to really care. Because right now, like anything in fashion or anything you consume, it's a mode of self-expression. So I know for myself, I prefer to buy from Indigenous businesses. Like I prefer to support people in the community who are doing that hard work, who are hustling and trying to do that. And I think that like sometimes I see a lot of businesses who don't do enough outside of just saying that like Indigenous owned business. They don't tell their own story with like specifics. You know what I mean? Like they don't tell like the community that they come from. And especially because we run on kinship, like I think that like the one element, I was talking with the guy who's like essentially going to be the next chief of my community. We were talking about it, which is like a lot of times Indigenous people like will open up a conversation about where you're from, because that's how we like qualify each other. It's like, oh, where are you from? But if you end up saying like a city, then people are like, okay, that's interesting. You dive more into that. But usually it's like, hey, where are you from? And you're Musqueam, or I'm from Kitagan-Zibi, or I'm from this reserve. And then usually it's like, oh, who do you know? And then like maybe you know a family. Do you know these people? And you go on and so forth. So I think that a lot of times too, that translate awfully enough into like businesses. Because sometimes too, that's how we qualify whether or not a business is truly from our community or not. And like if they're claiming to be from my res and then that person's never stepped foot there and lives in the US, then obviously there's a conversation that needs to be had in terms of keeping that person honest, or trying to have that conversation, or calling them in and having a serious conversation about that. But I still think that pages in any realm are like the most underutilized, because it's just challenging how you talk about yourself. And I think that definitely the elements of, if you have like your brand story, you have your brand idea, the whys, that makes that your life way easier. And then on top of that too, it makes your life marketing way easier, because then you know the story that you want to tell and you know how to contribute to that. And then there's settings, which is like how you take payments, the taxes, staff accounts, like if you have more than one staff account, where you set up shipping rates, where you ship to, where you maybe don't want to ship to. Maybe you don't want to take orders from China. Maybe you only want to take orders in Canada. All those things.
I have to go now, but you said that in regards to your taxes, you have it all set up for a tax exemption, so
Yeah.
you're going to do all the,
Yeah, so essentially it was a process of partnering with somebody who was I think he was from a res in Southern Ontario, but he had developed an app that allowed a way of processing status cards, so allowing to take that information and cross-referencing it.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing you to like submit it, and then for you to reference it, and then I'll also allow tax exemption all in like kind of one flow. So essentially we just built that into taxes. So allowed that dude to like really, really,
if the business was on reserve.
yeah.
May I take one of these?
Yeah, of course.
That's your business card?
No, it's actually just like a thing you put on the back of your phone for your cards, but yeah.
Probably won't, but I'll keep the name in mind anyway.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
What's that?
Those bags, are they for?
Yeah, so there's like a bunch of swag here. There's like gum, stickers, and bags. Maybe you need a new
You want a
grocery
bag
bags in
before
there.
you leave? You want a bag before you leave?
Sure, why not?
There's also gum in that first
I
bag.
love gum.
Yeah, so the thing I was mentioning is those themes. So those themes are kind of like the skin. It's like how your online store looks. So like when you have your online store, you have like, essentially it represents almost like as a finished product, but you have to plug all those things in. So like that main photo, all your product photos, like you set that up when you set up your store, but then it just looks like a finished product. So like something here is, Tanya Larson is Gwich'in from Northwest Territories. She's amazing, one of like, I think some of the greatest. So in her case there, like the way you flow through it, that's all a theme. So everything that's at work there is just the theme. It has all those different sections and all those elements. But as I said, there's over 100, and the way it looks there is that you just have like a theme editor, and then you click like customize, you put your photos into it. It's like, you don't have to do coding or anything like that. You just need to make sure that you have those great photos that are really gonna resonate, really shine, and show focus on your products and really make them as great as they could be. Other element is that now with this with like the digitization and democratization of entrepreneurship, is that you have the ability to sell everywhere to everyone now. Like no longer do you have to just, you can sell to your own community, but now you could develop a worldwide market based on like where you work into when you're ready, of course, because that's a big thing, is a lot of people try to move out there and then they just sink themselves before they could even really thrive. With that, you have this multitude of sales channels. So through every single one of those, you could sell through. So obviously there's tons of people who already, especially in the Indigenous communities, people who already are selling on Instagram. I feel like we own that at this point with the amount of beaters. There's like probably like 100,000 beaters just on Instagram. I buy from them all. But then you have people who sell on Facebook and the groups, there's very seldom people sell on Amazon, and less people are selling on Amazon now, just because the thing about Amazon, the challenge in Amazon is that you can't show your uniqueness, is that you're put in a format and it's just the product and like an algorithm that like shows you first. But if you have an original product, you're gonna be the only one. But less and less people are selling on Amazon just because they can't tell that story that makes people buy anymore. And it's just like one of the thing. And then there's all the other issues, which is like the fulfillment ethics and all that other stuff. Point of sale, which is to sell in person. So there's an app. So I could if I had goods right now, I could pull up my app and I could sell you something right now. And I could just process it here and take the inventory off. And then I could plug in like a thing and take your cards if you want. That's available all through the system. You could sell through Facebook Messenger. Maybe somebody wants to buy a product. You have a conversation there. You could send them a checkout and then they just check out right there. And then they got all the information to their Facebook Messenger. There's the Facebook channel is always like up or down, I find. For the most part, so for people who want to check out on Facebook, but I always find it like slightly shady, and I feel like Yeah, I don't know. I prefer to see the person's online website and kind of go through that experience and then move through it. But huge sales generator. Obviously, a lot of people allows you to get your product out there and people to like see it on Facebook. And if they do make a sale, you don't have to like manually take off an inventory number and then trying to reconcile that. Like you could also figure out shipping and all the other stuff that might go into it. There's the point of sale system, which is the POS. So if you sell in person, maybe you have a brick and mortar storefront and you want that all to be integrated into one inventory system, then you have that equipment that's there and available to you. Then yeah, multi-currency checkout. So your ability to just maybe you want to sell to Americans, you want to be able to sell to the UK, you want to be able to sell to New Zealand. Now finally you have the ability to kind of have one singular checkout and have the ability for you to be paid in Canadian dollars. Where before this, I mean, a year ago this didn't exist, but it was like a pretty sophisticated update just because a lot of times what a lot of online businesses had to do if they wanted to sell to a bunch of different countries, they had to like essentially open up a bank account in that country and then try to process it because the transaction fees were really challenging. So now you could just have that one Canadian bank account and then they'll do that transaction rate. It does it automatically, yeah. You just like, you'll get like a payout and it'll tell you what the conversion rate was at that time that person checked out, and then you just get the money in Canadian. Apps, as I said, there's an app store. That's like for all the custom stuff you want to do. Like I was mentioning the pages, I was mentioning like the big thing is like email marketing, like people who like sign up and just want to like, not even necessarily be sold things, but just like continue to hear from your story. Like maybe you just showed at Indigenous Fashion Week here in Vancouver and you wanted to tell people afterwards like, hey, we just showed here and now we have like some stuff that we are selling there, or we're, you know, you just keep people in the loop because like people invest in businesses they truly care for. You invest in the people, you invest in what their beliefs are, or all those things. And when you share those stories and you share those narratives, then you allow people to kind of go on that journey with you. So I think that like things like email marketing campaigns are kind of good avenues of storytelling. Sometimes they're just like super intrusive and they're like nobody likes to feel like they're being sold stuff. Like I think nobody likes car salesmen. So like the other element of that is you have Shopify Partners. So Shopify is a partner system which is design agencies actually. So Anna Mickey is a design agency that's actually based out of Victoria. They're like just like a whole entire all Indigenous technology company. They're amazing. But what they do is they just, anybody's digital ideas, they just kind of make it exist. They just go, if you want a website to exist, if you want, you know, somebody to help you with your online store, or you want some people to like kind of help design some things for you or anything like that, they're amazing. But they're part of our partner infrastructure, which is like all around the world, like agencies working in a bunch of different things that are all experts to work on one thing. If you only want to design the products, but you have enough cash flow to be able to hire someone who just deals with the website. There's that too. Additional resources to that, just basic tools, is that we have a bunch of different tools. You have things that allow you to make business cards. So like base templates for business cards, to have like a gift card template, to maybe there's an invoice that you have to generate outside of the actual Shopify thing. Maybe they don't need to go through a POS. Maybe it's for work that's outside of that business entity, but you just want something that looks official. You could actually just use an invoice generator to say how much you're charging them, who it is, and then provide that for them like fairly quickly. Order purchase template, similarly, pretty much the same thing. Privacy policy, so like when people go through, that's always an element of a website. It's like you have it at the bottom. It's like that fine print sometimes. And then a shipping label template, that's all in there. Those are all available like just from Shopify.com. It's like in a tool section, so you just like pull that up anytime you need any of those things, even if you don't have a Shopify store. Big thing is the help center, so it's like kind of like your brain of all that knowledge. So maybe like the big thing is that I try to encourage people that yeah, maybe it'll seem intimidating to everyone, and it seems more technical than you think of. But similar to my story of my friend Quem, you know, she was a single mom, like was a school teacher who just decided to kind of go on it. And I think that like a big element of being an entrepreneur is just like, you know, just jumping, you know, similar to what the talk was earlier of just going for it, you know, and just figuring it out. And there's tons of resources that are going to come to your level and kind of like help you figure out. There's the help center if you're somebody who's more visually orientated and you want to read something and watch some tutorial videos and stuff. that's all there for you. If not that, there's actually an academy. So there's like, if you want to like take courses, there's like free courses you could sign up for, and then they go step by step of how to like get to where you want to be going. So maybe you watch that first and then decide to take a jump. And then there's also like the support system, which is like what we call gurus based in Canada. So Canada, Ireland, and New Zealand, they're just people you could call 24/7, and you could talk to them over the phone about anything, like literally anything. There's like some wild calls like happen, just like not about Shopify businesses, but they're always there. You could even chat with them if that's more your thing. But otherwise, they're always on the phone, and they're there to like, if you're having a struggle figuring out shipping or pages or whatever it is, like you could call them 24/7, and they're just there to talk it through with you. And for the most part, the really amazing thing in that is that like 40 to 45% of them, similar to myself, is somebody who owned a business before. So they're coming from like the trenches. They're coming from an environment where they've like run their business and either sunk and like gone through like the peaks and valleys of like running your business, of feeling like you're not getting any headway, or like, you know, money struggles or anything like that. They just get it. So you have that conversation with them about like anything really, and like they just kind of get it. So I think that, to be honest, is like probably Shopify's secret weapon. I think that's probably the key to their success, is that they just hire really, really amazing people and just try to find people of diverse voices and diverse backgrounds to really come and really help shape kind of the story of how different people express themselves through entrepreneurship. Then there's the blog, which the blog is like a mixture of internal people and external people who write like a bajillion different things about entrepreneurship, like Indigenous entrepreneurship, you know, what it is to be in the Black entrepreneurial community and what that is, and like kind of what are some of the struggles, and then everything from like what are like, I don't know, the best 5 apps for your phone as an entrepreneur, and like that whole wide array. There's over like thousands of them now, but they've just been collecting over the last 10 years, and then sometimes now they're sourced from externally to kind of come in and give you like some insights to a lot of different things. Then there's Burst. Like a big thing is there's a struggle to find good quality photography. The big element is that you have to make sure that it's licensed. You got to make sure that you're not using somebody else's photos. Like you can't just rip it from someone's like Facebook and then not expect that they're going to come back at you and be like, yo, I took that photo, and like that photo is of my like family member. Why are you using that on my site? And like the issue is finding like license, like sort of royalty-free photos. Is that we actually have a service called Burst, is where we just collect like tons of licensing free images, so that maybe you need a place filler for something, or maybe you need something to write that email marketing campaign. You could just pull one of those photos in and just send it out and not really have to worry about any kind of pushback on it. What's that? It's actually a lot of people who work at Shopify. So it's like a difference between like some of the people who are like professional photographers. There's Creative Commons. But I think that the large majority are actually people who work in the various things. So if anybody wants to like donate their personal photography, then it's taken in that. But we have like a professional studio team, because Shopify is like, I don't know, we have like we make online content now. So we make like YouTube videos. There's a lot of stuff too. I mean, I can show you a video. We made kind of one of the coolest businesses that I kind of was mentioning earlier is Tilco Nation, has essentially like one Shopify store for the res. So they just like have one person that runs it. Then a lot of like the cookums and a lot of the older elders who make their goods, they just sell it through that online store, and that money is just distributed between whoever made that good. So that story was for me like the most amazing brain center, because I was like, no matter what they charge, you can't get more authentic than that. Like especially if it's in a remote area, you just can't. And as long as you tell that story and its fullest, like people are not going to deny that it's worth whatever you're charging for it, because it's like there is like similar to what you were mentioning. Like when you travel the world, there's a marketplace for this. There's people who want these goods and they want them as authentic as they can be. The issue is that the people who had those relationships before, you know, like these knockoff kind of appropriative, you know, people, they had those relationships. They don't stand a chance anymore. They don't need to anymore. They could step out of the way, and then now we have the authentic goods. So yeah, and then there's just some details about best practices, but I feel that's like a little too forward. The big elements that I usually always reiterate is that, similar to what was mentioned earlier, is you're never going to be fully ready. That's like the number one thing I talk to about any entrepreneur is they feel they're just not ready yet. They're like, I just don't know if I could do this. Like, I just don't know. Like, I want to make sure it's perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And there's so much evolution that comes with putting yourself out there. Like, you see how people respond. You see like what stuff people are like, yo, that's amazing. And then it changes your creative process. And it's a key part of the creative process. It just doesn't end when you launch it. You're never going to be like fully realized. Is you have to have that interaction, especially if you're working from within a community or something like that, where people are going to be like, yo, that's something that like I beaded that obviously you took a photo of, and like, what's up, like what's going on here? And then like, you know, you really have to go through that kind of metamorphosis and sort of evolve your business. And then yeah, leveraging your brand identity and tell your story. Similar to everything I kind of said is that I think that like as Indigenous people, we have the best stories out there, and we have the most rich, and they've never been told by us before. So I think it's only the upper trajectory where we could find those nuances and the individuality of the distinctions between even communities within the same nation. I think there's just so much uniqueness out there, and how you tell that story is really up to you. Build trust with your community and your customers. Yeah, being open and honest and conducting yourself in a diligent way and communicating consistently about everything. You know, maybe you have an issue delivering an order, instead of just shutting that person out, having an open dialogue about like, hey, there's something that's going on in my life, and right now I'm sorry I can't get to your order, but I'll have to delay it by a couple of weeks. Being open and honest, and not just being like, oh, I'm dealing with this and that. It's about just developing that relationship with a community that's supporting you, and also just developing that trust. I think similar to a lot of what people is being a constant learner. I don't know if Leslie, you could speak to this, but I feel like most entrepreneurs I know, that's like kind of the secret weapon, is that like tomorrow Instagram could be folded, and then suddenly all those leads that you made like are over, right? And then you fall in a scenario where you're suddenly having to try to like rebuild your business. So most entrepreneurs are always constantly trying to learn. They're trying to figure out what's next, what's like now, what's next, and what's kind of coming. So it's just like constantly being a learner and trying to like, you know, if somebody says something that's kind of interesting you, to kind of be like, okay, what's that about? I don't know anything about it. And not being self-conscious about maybe you don't know something. And I think that's a big element that's challenging, because it's, for the most part now, that there is other Indigenous people there who have that knowledge and want to share, who've already created businesses or at a certain level who want to share, who want to like, you know, create platforms and bring people up with them. And I think that like using every resource you have available, using every single contact you have available, anybody, you know, somebody's cousin, if it's like, you know, this distant connect. Exactly, yeah. We're all connected in that same way. And I think that like, you know, even when I met Jolene, we have like 5 people in common that like, and we never met each other. So it's just like in those situations, we're like a tight-knit community that like are only a few degrees of separation at any given time. And then the last big thing is definitely optimize for mobile. That's the element I see, is people build these like really, really huge websites that like have all, like everything's really large, but like think about it, how much time do you spend on your phone comparatively to your laptop? It's like not even remotely close. So the same thing now is that, yeah, exactly. I mean, even people watch Netflix more on their phone than they do. So like in that case, it's just like recognizing that like where your buyers are at and where potentially people will find you is most likely going to be on their phone. So optimizing your business to look as amazing, to tell that story on mobile, is really huge.
On like the reports, will it tell you if your buyers
Yeah,
are on?
it tells you what percentage of your buyers come from what type of device. So, yeah, hopefully I flew that fast. Yeah.
So how we're talking about the email marketing in Shopify, can you also see if, like, say customers put items in their cart and don't purchase them?
Yeah, those are called abandoned checkouts.
Yeah.
So abandoned checkouts, yeah, you have a register of a bunch of abandoned checkouts, so that oftentimes allows you to be like, oh, like,
Email them and be like, hey, we see.
yeah, hey, like maybe there's a 15% discount. I just would rather you have my thing than not have it. Then I'll give you a discount code. Yeah.
How does Shopify make its money?
So it's both subscription based, We also developed a lot of things in order to kind of keep the capacity growing. So we process our own payments. So the big thing is it's subscription based. So when you pay for Shopify, you either pay $29 a month or up and up depending on what your needs are as a business. So that's primarily how it makes its money. And then on top of that too, it's really just payment processing and